Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another video, and it's Mando's Eve. The Mandalorian season finale will be coming out in under 12 hours, so maybe I'm stupid to make a video that won't be popular for very long, but I wanted to address a concern that I've seen going all around the Star Wars community. There are a lot of people who are a little bit worried about the Mandalorian season finale after some news that came out today, but I will tell you that I'm not, and I'm going to do my best to put on my fatherly shoes. I do have 2 kids at home, believe it or not, and try to make you guys feel a little bit better. So, the director for The Mandalorian Chapter 16 was not disclosed early, as was the case with the directors for the other episodes of this season. Like, we knew the Ahsoka episode was probably going to come when it did, because that was an episode that was written and directed by Dave Filoni. We even knew that Robert Rodriguez would be directing his episode, despite the fact that he was apparently a pretty late addition. So, given that it is the season finale and there had been no director yet, there were some pretty crazy theories about who might step in and direct. I heard a lot of people say Rian Johnson. I heard a lot of people also say George Lucas. Both of those decisions were actually met with positivity and negativity. For my part, I actually think Rian Johnson would do a better job directing the episode with the script, whereas I think George Lucas is a better ideas guy. But anyway, the Mandalorian himself, Pedro Pascal, actually revealed that it would be none other than director Peyton Reed who would be taking the helm for the final episode. Now, you may not recognize Peyton Reed, but he actually directed the second episode of the season, that is Chapter 10, which was called The Passenger. Aside from that, he's responsible for several Marvel movies, I believe, including Ant-Man and the Ant-Man sequel, but a lot of people were worried because I think generally Chapter 10 is seen as the weakest of this season. I personally want to say that I would agree with that assessment. However, being the weakest of The Mandalorian Season 2 is quite an honor. This season has been a major step up from Season 1. I would say even Chapter 10 is better than a couple of episodes we got in Season 1, including the Gunslinger and the one where they break out of the New Republic prison. For those who are interested, I actually had as my least favorite episode recently when I made a list on Twitter, but I've sort of rethought things, and yeah, it's not quite there, although it's probably bottom 3 or 4 for me. But again, even with that, from the outside, that's still a little worrying, and when I read it, I was worried for a second until I thought things through. Having one of the directors responsible for a bottom 3 episode now helming the finale, I don't know. However, I've come to realize that my issue with episode 2 is not related at all to the directing, and when you go back and watch that episode, there are lots of really good moments that I want to highlight in just a second, including one that I just discovered the other day. The issue with episode 2, in my opinion, it relates to script. There's not a whole lot that the Mandalorian is able to do in that episode. He crash lands on a planet, they get stuck there, they work their way out. There's nothing really compelling, at least on the surface. I think a lot of people have pointed out that I've somewhat minimalized the character development in that episode, and I agree. I think episode 3 also pays off that character development with the reuniting of the frog lady and her husband. I think there are still some plot threads regarding Baby Yoda that haven't quite been picked up yet, but the issue there is with plot and script, and that episode was written by Jon Favreau, who has written the vast majority of the Mandalorian episodes for this entire season, and has surely put together the entire plot with help from others like Dave Filoni. But really, this seems to me to be Jon Favreau's vision, so any issues with that episode feeling like filler, and we will return to that in a second, are on him rather than the director. And this isn't the first time Jon Favreau has perhaps had an issue like this. The script for The Tragedy, which he also wrote, the episode with Boba Fett directed by Robert Rodriguez, was only 19 pages long, which Robert Rodriguez says translated to about 19 minutes of film time. Now, obviously that's not enough, so he was forced to do a lot of inserted action scenes, which I think is one of the weaker parts of that episode, but is also not a deficit I think it's fair to fully attribute to Rodriguez, because he had to fill a lot of time without drastically changing the narrative of what would happen in the episode. I mean, you can't have a stormtrooper kill somebody if it's not already in the script, so he sort of has to make it up as he go, and I think that's why you get the more anemic action scenes. Although I'm not anyone associated with filmmaking, I know very little about filmmaking, at least apart from what the average person would know, so this is just my estimation. The good thing is, though, Jon Favreau has written pretty much all of The Mandalorian, as I said, aside from a few episodes, and specifically that's 2 episodes each season, he's written it all with help. So I very much doubt there's going to be an issue of not enough to direct in the season finale, and I actually can't think of too many plot-centric episodes of The Mandalorian that people have complained about. Like, the real episodes that have been low on people's rankings have been, for example, The Gunslinger, which in season 1 we thought was a bit of a side story, but now we see introduced Fennec Shand, and that's the same with Sanctuary, etc., etc. So I think the season finale is going to be well written, and I think that Peyton Reed is really going to do a phenomenal job. But I also wanted to take a closer examination of his episode of The Mandalorian, because I do think there's a lot of really underappreciated stuff in there. First of all, the setting for the passenger doesn't do the episode a whole lot of favors. Most of it's spent on an ice planet, which just naturally isn't a very interesting location, and yes, Hoth, that includes you. However, the parts of the episode that are shot on Tatooine, especially the parts inside the cantina, I think are handled really well. Right at the beginning, we get a shot of Mando sort of hiking back. We get an awesome, very Star Wars-y shot from the distance, lots of, flying ships and everything else, and it just looks really interesting. It's a new perspective, or at least a slightly different perspective on a shot that we've gotten before. I also think the interior shots of the cantina are great. Again, the same thing, but just from different perspectives. It's sort of a darker look at the cantina than usual. I mean, darker literally relating to light, but we get different aliens in there. I think Dr. Mandible, although he is just a giant ant, is one of the most memorable Star Wars aliens that I've seen in a bit. And I'm a sucker for pod racers and Treadwell droids, so that next scene also earns a pass from me. The next scene I wanted to draw attention to, and this is something that I didn't appreciate until recently, is where Baby Yoda goes up to the vat of eggs, and I just initially thought that he put his hands up to it and stared sort of longingly at the eggs, but if you watch again and listen, you'll see that Grogu actually uses the Force to pull the eggs closer for a better look, and I think that's just a really nice detail, and one that I definitely haven't appreciated until now. I think the X-Wings chasing the Razor Crest into the ice planet's atmosphere and through the canyons is similarly great, especially the part where they're going through the clouds and the X-Wing pilots are just like, I really don't know where this bucket thinks it's going to run away from, and yeah, they do know the Razor Crest sucks, so that's nice. And I guess when it comes to action, I will say, although I think bugs are generally one of the most uninteresting enemies you can fight, I thought the actual action scenes themselves were really, really well done. The Mandalorian doesn't frequently have full chases like this, where the good guys are just absolutely overwhelmed by the enemy, so I enjoyed that, especially with how they played with Frog Lady's frog-like movements. But most memorable for me was probably the interior scenes of the Razor Crest when Din Djarin is running from the spiders. I thought that was really well done, and given the possibility of this next episode taking place on Moff Gideon's light cruiser, I don't know, it just makes sense. So yeah, try not to worry. I think this episode is in really good hands. The fact that episode 2 is, in my opinion at least, this isn't universally one of the weaker of the season, and true, one of the weaker of the series is not really something to concern yourself with. I think it'll be great, but we'll know in just a few hours. And guys, I will be posting a full spoiler review tomorrow morning. I'll keep spoilers of the thumbnail and the title and whatever else, but after you watch the episode, make sure you come back to my channel. As you know, The Mandalorian's a pretty small show. There's not many YouTubers covering it. I will have exclusive coverage, I'm sure. But until then, guys, have a good one. Have a good night's sleep. If you don't go to bed, Mando won't find you. May the Force be with you.